He lost that election by more than 7 million votes. It was 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. It wasn't even close. 60 federal and state courts had rejected every claim of electoral fraud and corruption. So we had an attempted political coup surrounded by uh, insurrectionary violence led by Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and other groups that were identified, and then all this mob violence. So we're going to tell the truth about what happened.
Let me start by asking your reaction just generally to Charlie Kirk's shooting death yesterday.
Well, it's a nightmare. Political violence is absolutely inexcusable and unjustifiable, and we denounce it, we abhor it, and it's dangerous. And now's the time we've got to return to the principles of nonviolence. That's the whole point of a social contract, is that we agree to have political discussion and disagreement nonviolently. We don't kill our fellow citizens. So my heart goes out to Charlie Kirk's family, and you know, we continue to do whatever we can to re-emphasize the central importance of nonviolence in all of our political engagements, and we hope that every political leader and every office holder will do that.
Okay. Let me move to what we were planning to talk about today, which is like this government funding debate with the government funding expiring September 30th. So a lot of talk about Democrats should have some conditions for further votes, particularly in the Senate where some Democratic votes will probably be needed. Absolutely. But so what is your view on that? Are there some conditions that should be attached to Democratic votes? And if so, do you have any, is that healthcare? What is that for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, we don't even know whether we're going to support it or not support it. And remember, Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, and effectively they control the Supreme Court. So if they want to pass a budget, they can pass a budget without us. Now, if they can't do it on their own, and we know that they would prefer to do it on their own, but if they can't do it on their own, then they come to us, and then we engage in the old-fashioned art of legislative compromise. We are going to defend the health care of the people. We are going to demand that 17 million people who are about to be thrown off of Medicaid get health care coverage. We're going to demand that Social Security be protected. We're going to demand that all of the laws be enforced. Okay. So that's to start off with. We would like to make that deal with them, and we should be able to make that deal. That's precisely the kind of deal we made. But there's an additional problem now, which is they have shown a willingness to engage in a bipartisan budget compromise, then come back later and use their paper-thin majorities in the House and the Senate and control of the White House to rescind, that is, to revoke the budget items they don't like. In other words, the ones that we negotiate for, that we demand, that are our part of the compromise, they're willing to unilaterally revoke later. Well, we're not suckers. We're not going to do that. And so we want ironclad language in there that they will not go back on the budget agreement and use one-party control to rescind the things that we've negotiated for.
So I heard,
yeah.
So I heard three things there. I heard healthcare, which means Obamacare subsidies, particularly. Is that what you're saying, or just generally healthcare?
And across the board, I mean, every part of the healthcare of the people, we are fighting to guarantee. That's an absolute minimum for us.
Well, I guess we was talking about rolling back the Medicaid cuts within the
Yes.
big beautiful bill. Is that where should that be a condition as well? Rolling back, go ahead.
Yeah,
are you going to insist upon that? I know you would prefer it to change, but are you going to insist upon that?
Yeah, well, that's my starting position anyway. And to be clear, I'm the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee. I'm not on the Budget Committee, so it's going to be up to them and our leadership and our caucus to do it. But my feeling is that our people want to fight, our caucus wants to fight, our leadership wants to fight. We want to fight to protect the healthcare of the people, all of us. And this last big dreadful bill was the largest revocation of health care in American history. So we can't have that.
But something in the bill that says that the rescissions have to stop. They can't come back later and cut things. That's a condition you, Jamie,
Yes.
you, Congressman Raskin. I know you don't speak for the whole caucus. That should be, in your view, that should be part of any deal.
It needs to be that. Again, I don't know that we've ever had a rescission prohibition provision. So we'd have to see exactly how it's written. But yes, we need to button it down as clearly as possible that the whole compromise cannot be undone by unilateral one party action. And so, as much as possible to make it completely irrevocable once the budget agreement has gone into effect.
I don't love this language, but if those conditions are not met, the Democrats should not vote. It wouldn't be the Democrats shutting it down. It would be the Democrats should not vote for an agreement that does not include these conditions, is what you're saying, right?
Remember, they control the
They control it.
government. It's extremely narrow. So it's up to them whether the governments can be open or closed. They control every branch in every house of government, right? So if they can't govern on their own, what it means is they need to enter into bipartisan governance, right? And obviously, when they can do things over our objections, they do. And in fact, Trump now just ignores the Republicans in Congress. He just goes ahead and does it unilaterally. We have to reassert congressional preeminence over the budget. We have the power of the purse. So
Should some agreement also state that Trump cannot unilaterally ignore the budget? Because I think he's done that a little bit himself as well. Would that be something you would push for as well?
yes, indeed. I mean, that's why I'm saying we want to enforce the law across the board. Um, the Judge Breyer in San Francisco just struck down the militarization of law enforcement, the deployment of American soldiers against American communities. He said that's what the Posse Comitatus Act is all about. That totally violates American federal statutory law and American tradition. We don't use the army against the people in that way. That's what we have local police forces for. So I would love to see that as part of it.
Some kind of
Obviously,
restriction on the National Guard usage, in other words, should be in the bill, is what you're getting at.
again, the enforcement of the law. I mean, the law is being
Okay.
violated in so many different ways. We've got
Okay.
more than 200 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders across the board. And so we want to make sure that none of the money that we're appropriating is used for purposes that are at odds with the US Constitution and federal law. I mean, another example would be, when all of the immigration raids began, they were invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which clearly doesn't apply. That's a wartime statute, not a peacetime statute. That got struck down by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, an extremely conservative
Conservative.
court. They struck that down. So, yeah, we wouldn't want any money going into that. So, we want to make sure money is only used for lawful purposes and not in places where the courts have struck down federal action because they keep going against the rulings of the courts.
Let me shift focus to the Epstein debate. I guess we both houses of Congress now. You've had a vote to potentially get these files released. The Republicans have, in both cases, voted against that. What's the next thing Democrats can do? Is there any what other levers do you have to get these files released?
Well, we just had a new member of the House of Representatives sworn in yesterday,
Okay,
Mr. Walkinshaw from Virginia. So now we are only two votes away. No, one vote. Yeah, we're only one
I'll
member
look it
away
up.
now.
Okay,
We needed two members to join uh, the uh, the petition for discharge. Right, a discharge petition is when the leadership is bottling up a bill and not
right.
letting it out of committee. If you can get a majority of the members to say dislodge that, discharge that. Well, we've got every Democrat. We've got four Republicans: Mr. Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Uh, Lauren Boebert, my friend, and Nancy Mace. Okay, so those four Republicans have joined. We only need one more Republican now to join us to discharge the legislation, to get it out and put it on the floor. So we're very close. Yesterday in the Judiciary Committee, there were a number of bills dealing with immigration and trafficking, and I introduced as an amendment that none of them go into effect until they first release the complete Epstein file, which of course the Republicans had been demanding, Trump had been demanding, but after they delegated the task to 1,000 FBI agents of poring over all of the Epstein files and redacting offending passages. Then they came back and said, "Oh, nothing to see here. We don't want that anymore. Sweep the whole thing under the rug." Well, we're not going to take that. We don't want the dribs and drabs that they're sending us. And I'm grateful to our colleagues, the Democratic colleagues on the House Oversight Committee, who pressed to get the kind of stuff we've seen recently, including the birthday note, which Donald Trump claimed didn't exist. He sued the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion because they reported on it and then was debunked by the disclosure of it. But in any event, we don't want these dribs and drabs coming out. We just want the whole thing. We don't want the stuff that they want us to see. We want the stuff they don't want us to see. We
What's the
want
next mechanism to
entire.
push them to get the final vote or to get the next couple of votes? What's the other?
We are looking for that final Republican who's willing to step up. And of course, um, most of the Republicans are telling their constituents that I supported um, having the oversight committee look into it. But I don't know how much confidence people have in Chairman Comer's willingness to ask the hard questions, the tough questions, and subpoena all the documents. And we don't need to be cherry picking this thing. We just need to get the entire Epstein file, which is, of course, was the original bipartisan demand. And we should stick with that.
Last question, I guess you, Congressman Crockett, a few others are on this. So the Republicans have this new "we're going to reinvestigate January 6th" committee that you're going to be on. Now, talk about what you can do there and how you can prevent this from being, an overturning of history and a whitewashing of history, which is, I assume, what they want it to be.
Well, we won't let that happen. I mean, we're there to refute and debunk all of the lies and conspiracy theories. But look, the truly bipartisan select committee on January 6th um, worked on this for more than a year and a half. We interviewed more than 1,000 witnesses. We looked at more than 1 million documents. And we released a report which has just been completely unrefuted and untouched by the right wing, despite the fact that they have engaged in every effort to try to oppose it. They wanted to say it was really Antifa, it was really FBI agents, anything but what actually happened, which is Donald Trump incited a mob that came down and engaged in massive violence against our police officers. We had more than 140 officers that were wounded, injured, hospitalized, disfigured, forced to retire from the force because they're disabled. And that whole um, mob insurrection was surrounding an internal coup, an attempt to get the vice president of the United States, Mike Pence, to reject electoral college votes, which is not part of the Constitution, which is not part of any federal law, to return electoral college votes. So he would either end up declaring Trump won the election magically, or more likely, kick the whole thing into the House of Representatives for a so-called contingent election under the 12th Amendment. And there we would have been voting not on the basis of one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. And they knew that they controlled 27 state delegations. We had 22. Pennsylvania was tied with 9 members on each side. So Pennsylvania's vote would have just been written off. It would have been 27-22. Unless, of course, Liz Cheney, as the at-large member of Wyoming, had decided to stick with the actual vote. But even then, they would have won 26-23. And then they were prepared to have Donald Trump ride in and declare his victory. And at that point, finally, after hours of rampaging violence against the police and attempts to hang Mike Pence, he would have called in the National Guard to put down the chaos that he'd incited against us. And then maybe would have even who knows what measures he would have imposed at that point. But that was where they were headed. That was the claim. He lost that election by more than 7 million votes. It was 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. It wasn't even close. 60 federal and state courts had rejected every claim of electoral fraud and corruption. So we had an attempted political coup surrounded by uh, insurrectionary violence led by Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and other groups that were identified, and then all this mob violence. So we're going to tell the truth about what happened. We don't see why they're doing this again, other than Donald Trump is trying to engage in an Orwellian whitewash and revisionist history of
So
what
that's it.
took
Yeah.
place.
Congressman, thanks for joining me. I know you have a lot of fans. I'm one of them. New Hampshire is close to Maryland. I just as a note in case you weren't sure about that. So, thanks for
We
joining
love
us. I
New
know
Hampshire.
it'd be great to have you. I'm glad you're having such a great prominent role in politics, and I hope you continue doing that. Thank you. You're a real patriot.
Thank you for your great journalism, Perry Bacon. It's wonderful to meet you, and I send my best to all your wonderful fans out there.
Thank you. Bye bye.